What is up, everybody? Welcome into the first episode of Speedway Soccer Live of the new year. I am Davey Shepard, and do not mind the completely empty bookshelf behind me. I just moved into a new house, so forgive me for this evening. I'm joined tonight by Jonathan Slape, Ben Wright, Lucas Panzica, Speedway Soccer crew. No Sloop, Andy, or Will tonight, but we'll take care of you, we promise. Guys, first and foremost, Happy New Year. It's good to see everybody. I know we've chatted a bit, but it's good to be back to work. And let's get right into it. Ben, some big news. Probably start with it. CBA negotiations are going about how CBA negotiations usually go, which is not good. Bosses don't want to pay money. Employees want to make money. Nobody can agree about anything. That's pretty much the long and the short of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like we're kind of back to where we were last year. I mean, I remember before 2020 got crazy, we were all worried about a potential work stoppage at the start of the 2020 season that never ended up happening. But I feel like we're probably closer to that now than we were last year. I mean, we all obviously know what happened with the league and the players last year, where they agreed to a CBA at the start of the season. The pandemic hit, the league basically forced the players back to the negotiating table. And redid the CBA, and now they're having to negotiate it again just a couple months later. So, I mean, we'll get into this all, but it's a frustrating situation, definitely for the players and probably from the league too. For fans, it's frustrating because we would love to not be talking about this. But yeah, it's just, I think it's going to be a race to see if they can get anything done before the season is supposed to start. And I think more likely than that, I think we're probably looking at a delay to start the year.
But wouldn't you say that the league can't be frustrated with this because they're the ones that enacted the force majeure clause?
Yeah, no,
that's they're the ones that have put this whole negotiation back on the table for the third time within a 12-month span. So I know that Don Garber had said things that, they're wanting to get this done quickly and blah, blah, blah. But we didn't have to be in this situation if they had not exercised the force majeure clause.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I meant they were frustrated just with the situation in general. They're claiming $1 billion, $1 billion revenue shortfall. There he goes, 13 again. $1 billion revenue shortfall in their budget from this year. But yeah, I mean, they're the ones who are forcing the players back to the negotiation table, and without trying to stay as unbiased as I can, it definitely does feel like there's an element of the league realizing that they have a situation to get more concessions out of the players. Bob Foose, the executive director for the MLS Players Association today, basically he said multiple times he feels like the reason the league is so caught up on getting the negotiations done within this window is because they know that if they wait and they push negotiations on into the spring, that the situation is going to be completely different. That the economic situation is going to be better and they're going to have a lot less leverage. But they know if they do something quickly now, then they can probably get more concessions out of the players, which, like I said, trying to be as unbiased as possible. But I mean, it definitely feels like that adds up.
So I'm going to express the opinion that I've shared in the chat now. And I'm sure by someone out there, this will be construed as not being pro-labor, which I think if you know me, you know that is not where I'm trying to come from.
Davey Shepard is the 1%.
Yeah, that's just first. Right. But so anytime a CBA is ever up in a sport, I just always find myself in the place of saying, well, like, if the players just really mean business, they just will strike because, I mean, the owners are trying to save money. It's really, really simple from their end. They want to spend less money. Now, the only time that doesn't matter is if they are not making any money. And so if you're going to just eliminate their ability to make money, then they'll come back to the bargaining table. We've seen the NHL do this with the full season in 2006. And they came back in very good standing, all things considered, as far as lockouts go. We've seen the NFL miss more than about half of a season. Now, they ended up getting the games in later. And then we saw the NHL again with about a 6-month lockout, and they finished with a shorter season that year. So, all things considered, I just want to see players Like, just I believe in it. I dig the calls, but sometimes you got to take some lumps to get the things that you want. And like, the world isn't fair. And just we know what we're dealing with, the series of billionaires, right? All of these ownerships are made up of billionaires, and they're not going to play fair or do the right thing. And that includes John Ingram, who is a very nice guy. I've met him a few times, whatever. I like the guy. But he's a billionaire for a reason, because he doesn't waste money, and they're trying not to lose money on the version that they see as waste. Go ahead, Lucas.
I just wanted to point out, I do think that this kind of situation with the MLS is unique when you compare it to other NHL, MLB discussions. The vast majority of MLS players make a fraction of what your average MLB or NHL player makes. So a lot of MLS players' livelihoods were much more significantly impacted by the pandemic. So I don't know what kind of impact that would have on negotiations, if that would increase tensions, but that is something to take into account, that the average MLS players, in a lot of cases, are making what you and I make in some cases.
Correct. Yeah. And the other thing that I would say is that it's unique in the fact that there are other alternatives for players to go play in, and to the detriment of what I would say, I don't want Hani Mukhtar to leave and go play in League MX, which I think is a less financially stable league than MLS. But take it for what it's worth. Hey, if Hani can go get paid somewhere by someone who values him correctly, he's out of contract. I say go do it. Now, I know a lot of fans will disagree with that, but that's just my opinion. So I would say players got to be ready to dig in. I hope we don't see a work stoppage. But if you're not going to do the work stoppage, you're not going to get the concessions. Ben, go ahead. I'm sorry for talking so
No,
much.
you're good. Just kind of jumping in on Lucas's question about how it could potentially impact negotiations. I mean, I think a couple of things have already been touched on, but players are making, like Lucas said, a fraction of what the NFL and MLB or whatever other league in the US you want to compare it to. I mean, they're making, I think, $65,000 in some cases, which is, I mean, pretty typical salary for any of us, really. Like anyone in Nashville, it's a pretty average salary. I think that significantly impacts their ability to force a strike, because they can't hold out for long at all. Bob Foose, the MLS PA executive director, said they've been planning on a potential work stoppage for 2 years. So I'm assuming they have some kind of a system in place where they can help guys get by for a little bit, but I mean, they can't do anything lengthy. So that puts leverage with a league. But on the flip side, they can, like you said, they have other options that you don't have in the NFL. They can go overseas and make the same amount of money or more money potentially. And Foose said that players, he thinks this negotiation tactic that the league is doing, where they're reopening the CBA again, it's going to potentially prohibit players from coming in, because he said players talk to each other. And so guys overseas who are looking at moves to MLS are going to be aware of this, and it might lessen their desire to come. And he thinks you're going to see more players leave MLS, USL, and go straight to Europe instead of dealing with this. Because I mean, regardless of where you stand on this, players do not want to be negotiating this multiple times a year. And this is basically the third time they've been at the negotiation table in a calendar year, and they're fed up with this.
Yeah, and one thing I would question, maybe because I just don't understand the implications of it. If there is a work stoppage, we know that all of us are fans of European clubs, and we've seen like the need for the international transfer certificates and all of those things that go around as a part of a transfer for a player to be eligible. What does that look like when a league is under a work stoppage? That I don't know. I don't think there's ever been a situation in soccer where we've had that. So that would be a question that we will have to, like, that's something you have to figure out kind of on the fly and as it comes up. But I mean, I think some of the things that Bob Foose said today, and some call outs was how public the ownership has made this negotiation. They are the ones that activated the clause that brought the negotiations back up, but they're the ones that put out that new deal, which is in my opinion, which would extends the CBA to 2027, which is just a terrible deal for the players.
And Slape, he said that the media got that before the Players Association did.
Which, like, I mean, you may say, oh, that's not a bad idea, like just extending it, but 2026 is the World Cup in the United States. The Players Association is going to want to capitalize on the increased money that is going to be flowing into the sport, and why shouldn't they? And the ownership is just wanting to be able to keep more of that for themselves.
Well, and just generally speaking, what market value lasts 7 years? Nothing.
Like,
Nothing lasts 7 years. And so it's not the same thing for the players as well. So that's just nonsense. There's no way around that. I just think it's a really, really interesting case. And I think it's I think the thing that we see with these CBA negotiations over and over and over again is just how poorly organized the players' associations tend to be, and how hard it is to keep rank and file kind of on the same squad there. Because you talk about labor strikes, whatever, kind of worldwide or just even in the history of this country, the ones that are organized the best and can keep everybody on the same page the longest are the ones that have the most success. Traditionally in this country, we have not seen that at the player association level in sports negotiations for collective bargaining agreements. I think it's really, really interesting. I look forward to kind of seeing how it plays out. I do think it's just super interesting in that you kind of look across the scale of players that we have. Truth is, most lower level MLS guys go and could probably start on a lot of USL teams. So there's a place domestically for a lot of those players to fall. There's a place in other non-domestic leagues for a lot of the higher tier players to fall. I think there is leverage there for the players if they want to utilize it. I just remain doubtful that they actually want to utilize it. So I'm interested to see that moving forward. I don't want to go too far down in a rabbit hole here. Ben, Slape, Lucas, anybody have a final point you want to kind of touch on before we move along?
Just to your point about you don't know how resolved the players are or how organized they are. I think what you're seeing from them is they've kind of, ever since last summer, they've kind of felt this coming. So I don't know how organized they are, but I think this is the most prepared they have been probably ever for this type of negotiation. So I think whatever you end up seeing from the players is kind of going to be their best shot at this time around the negotiating table.
Yeah, and because I won't forget, like, Dan Lovett's right after the negotiations.
Yeah,
right. He made it very clear that they were very disappointed in the ownership, and they were not going to be. There was no goodwill left. Was basically what he said.
And it seems to have stayed that way.
Right. Or gotten worse.
Let's hop into Nashville SC topics. Probably the biggest piece of news of the last week, which there's been a few pieces of news. Mike Jacobs extended. What was the term on that, Ben?
3 years. He's here through 2023.
So he was originally going to be ending at the end of this 2021 season, correct?
2020.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There you go.
His deal was up at the end of this year.
His deal was up. So I think pretty much a no-brainer there. A guy builds a side that gets to the Eastern Conference semifinals in the first year. Really strong place to build from heading into season 2. And they've done a good job. You can't knock it. We said that kind of coming out of the year. I think you've got to ultimately give Jacobs and Gary Smith the benefit of the doubt in some ways, where probably everybody in this chat wouldn't necessarily have said that about both of those parties at the beginning of last season. So a lot of goodwill built up there. And I mean, credit to Mike, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you looked at the start of the season, you talk about goodwill and the job that he's done, but going into the season in the greater MLS sphere, everyone thought Paul McDonough was the guy that was gonna have put together a great team in Miami, and I think later we'll talk some more about Miami. But seeing what Jacobs has been able to put together, which with a fairly not tight budget, but a smaller budget than a lot of teams, and the pieces they've been able to bring in, and the talent they've brought up from USL, I think shows a lot of the value that Jacobs is able to find.
And any thoughts?
No, I mean, I think Slape nailed it. I think you saw him. He's not working with the smallest budget in MLS, but it's not one of the bigger ones either. And I think he kind of built a roster that punches above its weight in terms of spending, which is, of course, kind of been his philosophy from day one. But yeah, I mean, I think when you have one of the more successful expansion seasons, just in terms of results in the playoffs, which is what this league is built around, I mean, you'd be stupid to just move on from that. So yeah, I think he's more than earned 3 more years, and I think it's not just about what he has already built, but I think you can see kind of some of the long-term pieces that they're looking at. I mean, he's talked about guys like Jonder Cadiz and Anbal Bwana being brought in for 2021, and I think you can see even from like Brian Anunga, I would point to him, Jack Mayer. I think there's some long-term pieces that may not have hit their best yet, but I think you can build around for a couple years more in the future. So I think that's kind of, like I said, not just what he's already done, but I think there's kind of a longer term project at play here.
And we talked all season about Nashville's way of building this squad almost being the antithesis of what Miami did. And it was almost a microcosm of that when they met in the play-in game in the playoffs and a 3-0 Nashville win. I feel like Mike Jacobs might be almost charting out a path for other general managers and decision makers for expansion clubs in MLS, showing a different way to do things and a steadier and more foundational way of doing things that I think we might see as other clubs start to creep into the league.
I think even what we've seen with what Austin is doing shows that some teams are taking some cues from Nashville. Because looking at the team that they're putting together, get some veteran MLS guys in both the center of the field, with going and getting Ring from NYCFC, picking up Beasler as a free agent, which I think is a great hire for them because it gives some veteran presence. Yes, he was hurt last year. But I still think Beasler has some things to offer, both as a leader in the locker room and on the field.
And the two are always going to be linked together. You talk about goodwill and just doing the right thing, results going the right way, built up in Nashville for Gary Smith and Mike Jacobs getting the extension. Paul McDonough on the way out at Inter Miami, head coach out as well. Why am I blanking on his name? Diego something, yes?
Diego Alonso.
I knew it was that. And potentially Phil Neville on the way in. So the whole thing is, look, I just think Nashville is in an interesting spot. Moving forward, we talked about personnel for a bit there. A bit of personnel news. Miguel Nazarit heads out on loan to Santa Fe. Not the Santa Fe in Argentina, as Lucas pointed out in the pregame show. That would have been
Independiente in Argentina, right?
Yeah, that would have been a pretty big deal for him, but it wasn't the case. And so, look,
it's one of the winningest clubs in Colombia, though, as far as I understand.
Yeah, right. It seems to be, and we talked about this in the chat a few weeks ago. Me, Slape, and Ben, and just him or Mayer has to be able to get minutes. One of those two players has to see regular minutes. And there was no way for both of them to do it this season. There just isn't enough minutes to go around. Andy Baba's ahead of them in the pecking order. You've got, obviously, the two starters, Romney and Zimmerman, then Andy Baba, and then you've got Jack Mayer. It just wasn't going to be this year for Miguel Nazarit. I think the guy's clearly got a level of talent. Again, we're going to credit Mike Jacobs for finding him. And so it seems like loan's the best case, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally he goes out on loan as a regular starter there and comes back and fights for a spot. But I think, there's always the potential that even if he doesn't come back to Nashville, that he kind of ups his value a little bit in Colombia, and Nashville can kind of recoup some of their investment in him and sell him on. But yeah, I think I'm interested to see with him kind of out of the picture for 2021, what happens between Mayer and Anababa, because I think before Mayer got injured, we probably started to see him make some strides, maybe not replace Anababa in the pecking order, but definitely kind of make a case for himself. And I think he's more of a natural center back, whereas Anababa is a guy that you can have on the bench. You can play really anywhere across the back line.
Ben, remind me, did we ever get confirmation of that injury?
No, it was a knee injury, and they didn't really say anything more than that. It kept him out for the rest of the season, so 5-6 weeks.
Maybe yes or something. I don't want to speculate, but it wasn't anything super serious.
Nothing that we've heard says that it'll impact 2021.
Right. Okay, good.
But we've talked about this with the U.S. calendar and potentially between 21 and 25 matches for the senior team. Zimmerman is going to be gone for some of that. And so I think there's going to be minutes there up for grabs. And I wouldn't be surprised if Mayer ends up kind of beating out Anababa for that second choice role.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. I'm interested to see how it plays out. Again, I think good for both, good for the team, good for the player as well. Nazarit's going to go get more minutes there, hopefully be able to kind of build himself up, because that would be assuming he's hopeful of getting a spot on Colombia's Olympic team, correct?
Yeah, I mean that you definitely feel like that's why he
wants
to
got to get minutes. I mean,
he wants to go play and get that opportunity. It opens up an international spot for Nashville. He was on a TAM level deal, so it opens up some flexibility within the roster and with the cap too. So I guess, like you said, I think it's a move that's great for all parties involved.
Hey, if you're watching, drop a question in if you've got them in any of the chat interfaces that you are participating in, whether that's Periscope, Twitter, Facebook, whatever it might be, YouTube. We're glad to answer any questions you might have. A few other topics we want to hit on tonight. Ben, we're down to 4 international spots left, but Mike Jacobs has been flipping those for some pretty serious cash, correct?
Yeah, I mean, and with, like Slape said, with Nazarite going on loan, you open one of those up. Jacobs has mentioned that they're going to announce green cards soon. I would expect that Leal and Mukhtar are 2 of those. I mean, they've been in the U.S. for basically a year, and Leal especially has moved his entire family here. So I think those 2 should be eligible for those. Cadiz probably won't happen until maybe mid-season next year. But I mean, Nashville's been opening this up pretty quickly. I think we've seen teams like Atlanta bring international players in and get them green cards within, it feels like a matter of months. So I think Nashville is definitely kind of following after that. And yeah, I mean, I don't think Nashville were ever going to use all of those international spots. So I think it's just good business to get, they've got 175,000 for 3 of them, which they weren't going to use. So, I mean, and Mike Jacobs has talked about just how he thinks allocation money is the number one asset in this league. So yeah, I think it's good business, and I don't think it's really going to impact Nashville in the transfer market.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are teams out there that need those international spots, like we see how Sensi, how Gerard Nijkamp chooses to construct a roster with how he relies on international players, and so just valuing the undervalued.
We got a question from Garrick Ledford. Garrick, thanks for hanging with us tonight. Would anyone entertain signing Yedlin? A lot of cash been freed up for a TAM deal. While I think all of those pieces are right, I think someone will entertain signing Yedlin. I don't think that person will be Mike Jacobs. If you're asking, would anybody in this chat do it?
I mean, I'd do it. It may not make the most sense. I'm
asking, like, okay, I know we all rate Alistair Johnston pretty highly, but DeAndre Yedlin's a clear upgrade on Alistair Johnston.
Oh, there would be no question about it.
I mean, there's no questions asked, right?
DeAndre's he's fun to watch too. I'd like,
right.
As someone who played fullback, he's fun to watch. I mean, I think that if Nashville wanted to play a back 3 as well and maybe get Mayer some time, he'd be a great addition. Like you said, I don't think Mike Jacobs does it, but if I'm putting together a team, I would entertain it.
I'm torn. I mean, because on one hand,
let me ask one quick question, man. Yedlin's got to get some serious minutes too, right? Because that right back pool is like as deep as it's ever been.
I mean, it's
one of the best right back pools in the world right now. So
it's probably the second best right back pool behind the English right back pool.
Yeah, I mean, sounds about right.
It's an interesting situation too, because I mean, I would say maybe 2 months ago, I wouldn't even have thought Yedlin was in the picture with guys like Dest and Cannon, but now he's kind of turned into the starter for Newcastle. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's still 27, so he's in his prime. If I'm him, I'm not sure that if you're still getting regular minutes in the Premier League, I don't know if you even think about going back to MLS.
He has had a bit of a resurgence at Newcastle, right? And I hear
he's 27.
When I hear he's 27, it almost catches you off guard because he was one of those familiar faces from that little run in the 2014 World Cup. When you hear he's 27, he's having a little bit of a resurgence in the Premier League. Would it make sense for him to come back to the States? I will see him back here. I would not be shocked to see him back here in the near future, the next couple of years possibly, but I don't know about right now.
Newcastle's such a volatile club, right? And it's just always which direction the winds are blowing there. And I think all players there kind of fall into that trap. And so,
I mean, as far as the Nashville situation goes, like he's better than Johnston, and that's not a slight on Johnston.
Right, yeah.
Johnston's not a Premier League starter. But at the same time, Johnston's 22. You got him in the super draft, so you're not paying him a ton.
Getting it his first cap here soon, yeah.
He's pushing into the Canadian national team picture. So, I mean, he clearly has a lot of upside. And while Yedlin is better, do you really need to make that big of an upgrade at the position for that much money?
Yeah, I don't think wins above replacement is like a soccer stat, but I don't know what is there. You know, I don't
think it's worth, from a Nashville perspective, and definitely from what we know of Mike Jacobs and how he runs things. I just don't see him thinking that it needs that much of an investment, and I think he would probably prefer to spend that money elsewhere. I mean,
let us dream, Ben. Like I said, I know that it's not.
If he shows up, I would be. I mean, he's fun to watch.
It's not.
I don't know if it makes sense. I think he probably goes back to Seattle. Honestly,
I mean,
nobody would be excited about it.
Yeah. I think he stays in Europe somewhere if he leaves Newcastle.
And he's a big enough player at this point. I mean, he's a Premier League starter. He's in the national team picture. If he comes back, as much as we all love Nashville, I don't know that Nashville's kind of the destination necessarily for those type of players. I think he's able to kind of take his pick of the league, and I would think he would probably go back to Seattle, one of the LA teams, even Miami maybe.
I mean, and if we're being honest, if I'm a player overseas and looking to get minutes, I'm not looking to come over to MLS right now with a chance of a work stoppage.
Right?
Because I mean, Yedlin's best bet is consistent playing time if he wants to play in any of these 25 matches coming up for the national team, and he needs to be playing. And it could be a situation where guys like the European guys are the ones getting called in because the European guys are the ones playing.
Right. All right. So from a potentially unlikely signing that we would say is not going to happen to a very likely signing that possibly has already happened, Rodrigo Pinheiro looks to be coming to Nashville. Ben, hit us with what you got about the player.
So I talking to a couple guys who cover Uruguay, the comparison they've all pointed to is Brian Rodriguez for LAFC, who also came through the Uruguayan League. He and Diego Rossi and Rodrigo Pinheiro all came through Peñarol, which is one of the bigger clubs in Uruguay. They've all said that he's similar stylistically, maybe without the kind of end product in the final third or the high end potential. I mean, we've already seen Rodriguez linked to some pretty major clubs in Europe. So they said he's similar stylistically, but maybe just a step below that. I think from a Nashville perspective, it kind of makes sense. I mean, we've been talking about getting another scoring threat on the opposite wing from Randall Leal basically forever. David Accam didn't really pan out in 2020, and I think his best case scenario, he comes back and kind of fights for a spot off the bench and potentially works into some of those rotation minutes. And I think a guy like Pinheiro, starting on the right or the left, he's able to flip kind of like we've seen from Leal. I think it just makes you a much more dangerous attack from all positions. Because, I mean, we're all huge Alex Muyl fans, and the guy puts in a shift on both sides of the ball, but just the end product isn't always there. And I think this kind of upgrades the roster and provides more service for a guy like Cadiz who needs service to score.
Well, it's another option, right? Which this team is obviously looking for in the final third. That's all you can really ask for this team to do. But I don't know, does it quell any concern about finding more consistency in terms of the end product? 3 goals, I think, in 20 appearances. Is that right, Ben? In that neighborhood in his time in Uruguay? I still worry about it.
I don't think it's a sure thing. I think it's a high upside signing, but it's definitely not proven.
Yeah,
there's no doubt right now. Sorry, Slape. There's no doubt what Nashville can be built on in terms of the final third, and it can score in bursts. But it's still the team that scored the third fewest goals in the league last year. So is it healthy Rios and a more tenured Cadiz and plugging in players like Rodrigo, is that enough to fill those holes?
I think Mike's got serious eggs in the Cadiz basket. Tell me you disagree with that.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I think we kind of saw Leal pay off. And I think from what I've seen, Pinheiro is a similar player, and I think he's coming from a league that you've seen translate to MLS similarly. So, I mean, I think it's probably going to take some patience, and there's definitely going to be a period where he adapts, but I don't think it's unrealistic to say that he could be just as impactful as Leal ended up being.
Mean, let's be honest. I know you said we're all big Alex Muyl fans, but if Pinheiro scores 2 goals, he's contributed more to the score sheet than Alex Moyle did.
Right, yeah.
Like we're operating with a right flank wall that has provided a lot of industry. Isn't a ton of end product there. So that could, but like Davey said, I think Jacobs is putting a lot of his eggs in Cadiz, panning out and being coming good and being success. And if that doesn't happen, it's going to be interesting to see what moves he makes, because that's really just going to be a measure of what he's able to do.
Well, I think an angle of the work stoppage we didn't even touch on. You want to talk about what a work stoppage would hurt? It's the ability to gauge where Yonder Cadiz is at this point, at whatever point in the season it might be. That loan comes up in June, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out if there is a work stoppage of a month or two. That's two valuable months.
You need as many minutes of Cadiz as possible to decide if you're going to pull the trigger. And as far as all his eggs in the Cadiz basket, I think they've obviously made a big investment. I think we saw Daniel Rios protected in the expansion draft, and I think above guys like Baji and Dunladi. I think, I'm not saying that he's going to be the starter or anything like that, but I think Nashville are pretty high on him if Cadiz doesn't pan out or if they need another option. I think they think that Rios can for sure do a job.
Can do a job, but the concern is consistency, right?
I mean, he was the joint top scorer on the team with Hani Mukhtar, and he played under 1,000 minutes. So I think
again, he played under 1,000 minutes because he can't stay on the field. We've had this conversation up and down.
Sure, part of it was down to not being able to stay on the field. Part of it is that he was second choice to Baji to start the season, and then he ended up being second choice.
He's near the end of the season, right?
And I would argue that he outproduced both of them.
But there is, and a player like Rios probably did not get the opportunity to consistency in a game-to-game basis because of the injuries, and for Cadiz with the late arrival, took him a while to get ingrained in the lineup. But that is number one for me with Nashville going in, is a player that will finish that chance in the box. If that's Rios, if that's Cadiz, we have yet to find out. That's what I'm
care who it is.
We don't know yet. Yeah, it doesn't matter who it is, but we don't know who that is yet. And we don't need to expect to know just yet. But after a few games in this next campaign, if we still don't know the answer about a third into the season, I think you might have an issue.
Yes, that I agree with Lucas 100%, because I think what you're seeing is that whether it was Baji or whether it's Cadiz later, I think the general manager and the coach are both giving you reason to believe they think the answer is someone not named Daniel Rios. So if Cadiz isn't coming good April or May, I think Jacobs has got to spend some money.
Yeah, no, I'm not arguing that Rios is going to be the starter if Cadiz doesn't work out. I think he's a great guy to have as your number two.
Agreed.
And I think that's probably what the best you can expect from him. But my question is, if you're Mike Jacobs and you're Ian Ayre and John Ingram, what does it take for you to shell out the cash to make the Cadiz deal permanent? What do you need to see from him in the next 6 months?
Yeah.
Is it, if he does more of the same that we saw in 2020, is that enough?
I think it's got to be more than that, right?
Yeah, I think it has to be.
Got to be more in product.
Yeah. Agreed. I don't think he can have the same stats going into May if they're going to keep him. I think he has to score more goals.
Not even just the stats. I mean, I think you need to see more just in general, not just the end product, but just linking with teammates.
And let's say this,
contributing more in the final third in general. I mean, I think he wasn't fit for 2020.
Right. That's I was just going to touch. I think all of us would say it's really unfair to judge him off what we have.
For sure.
So the jury is totally still out. And
right, but you do need to
totally blow our minds. I don't know, but
I mean, he hadn't played in 9 months, so I mean that's going to impact it. And you're hoping that he'll come into 21 fully fit and able to contribute. But if the production doesn't change from 2020, I don't think you pull the trigger on it.
And another caveat of that is Cadiz in his previous stops did not have that kind of consistency, right, that Nashville is looking for. And again, that may be because of a lack of opportunity, but he wasn't scoring in bunches for Benfica. I mean, his numbers were in a similar neighborhood. He hardly played for Benfica, but in the clubs that he played for, he's never scored in bunches. You don't see that 30 appearances, 22 goals mark at any stop he's had in his career. Sometimes it's similar to Pinheiro. Pinheiro is not an out-and-out striker, so it's totally different. But because you haven't seen that yet at any point in Cadiz's career. I wonder how short that leash is for fans, management, whatever it might be, to say, okay, maybe he's a good player. He's very physical. He's a big target striker, but maybe he's not that guy to reach 20 goals, be that first Nashville striker to reach that mark.
You know who is the guy up top? Tempo.
We're going to get there. I want to go ahead. I got one more thing.
Yeah, just one more point before we move on. It's not going to take much improvement in the final third for Nashville to be a better team.
Was going to be my same point.
With the foundation they have defensively, I expect them to still be one of the best defensive sides in the league. I would say that they should be a better defensive side, having your right back sorted from the start. So I think we can expect that to stay the same. And then even if you can pop up with 5 more goals throughout the season. I mean, I hope it's more than that, but I mean, the difference between 5 goals last year would have been huge.
I think the fact that we were just saying, hey, if he could be a Randall Leal kind of says how much we struggled at the wing position, because Randall Leal didn't light the league on fire last year. He was very workmanlike. Exactly. So, I mean, that shows where Moyle was. We all love him. We know what he did, but the other guys didn't quite pan out. And so I think it's really, really interesting to see.
And it's important, too, down the stretch was significantly better. I mean, even in the Columbus game, they didn't score. But, I mean, before that, you saw them kind of take it to Toronto. They should have scored multiple goals. They had chances against Columbus. I mean, McCarty hit the bar. They had plenty of chances. I mean, I think if they keep that up and just add a little bit more end product, it doesn't have to be significant, but it just a little bit more. And I think they're still in a good place for 2021.
Which is why we're sitting here discussing it with so much, I guess, tenacity, because you think about what this club can be with that kind of output offensively.
Absolutely.
I mean, pretty intriguing. So that's the reason why I'm putting so much focus into it.
I'm with you 100%, because I think if this team can find the goals, I don't think they're just a playoff contender. I think they can make a really, really deep run, and I think this year before showed us that.
Guys, how crazy is that we're even having this conversation a year in?
Wild, absolutely.
I would have told you you're absolutely insane this time last year.
I mean, imagine this time next year when if the team does find the goals, makes another conference semifinal or conference final or further, whatever it is, and then we're getting ready to go into the new stadium. It's going to just be an insane buzz around this team, and that's why I think it's so important that they get that piece right, because it does matter. It really, really does matter just scoring goals.
And there's enough turnover in the offseason right now with things that happened that Nashville can move up the table. Chris Armas is in it. Is in at Tampa Bay. Wasn't really impressed with what he did at Red Bull, because most of that was the work that Jesse Marsh had done.
You meant to say in at Toronto, correct?
What?
You meant to say in at Toronto, yes?
Yeah, I said in at Toronto.
No, you said in at Tampa Bay.
Oh. I may or may not be checking bets on Tampa Bay Lightning games.
There you go.
But maybe I was getting confused with Tampa also being the home of the Raptors right now.
Yeah, that's true.
But I mean, I think there's enough turnover. Atlanta will be back. I think with Gabriel Heinze, they're going to be a dangerous opponent this next year. But I mean, there is enough turnover in the Eastern Conference that we can improve. And like Davey said, not just be content making the playoffs.
Do we all agree that Columbus is as good or better than they were last year, though?
They're far and away better.
I think Columbus is going to have the chops to be one of the better teams in league history.
I mean, when you bring in
really good.
When you bring in Bradley Wright Phillips as your striker off the bench, you bring in Kevin Molino as well.
Yep.
I mean, I think you just went with having one of the most potent attacks in MLS. I mean, we got Zelarayan there, being able to pull the strings, and if Molino can get on the end of crosses like he did with Reynoso in Minnesota, I think they're going to be a very tough team to beat.
All right, guys, final 5 minutes, final topic of the evening. Nashville SC announced their mascot today, Tempo the Coyote, which I think is somebody said it in the chat earlier. It's probably the best individual piece of branding the club has ever done. Everybody kind of agree with that?
No, that was what I said. I think it was the best. Yeah. It's the best piece of branding and rollout, and just the entire package.
Agreed completely.
Of putting it out was fantastic.
And this is a great mascot city. Nash is great. I am a huge T-Rack fan. I think T-Rack is up there with Benny the Bull or the Philly Fanatic. I think he's that.
He's a polarizing figure, T-Rack.
He is hilarious, T-Rack. The tongue out the side of the mouth is just a winner for me 10 times out of 10. And I will not support Booster because Booster replaced Ozzy, who was the best mascot in the city, Ozzy.
My son sleeps with a stuffed Booster the Rooster every night.
Go. Booster the Rooster. Doesn't even dance on top of the dugout. He's a hack, Booster the Rooster.
You got to replace it with a stuffed Tempo while he's asleep one night.
Yeah, there you go.
And see if he notices the
Nashville SC, hook me up if you're watching.
No, I thought it was great. I thought the club did such a good job rolling that out. I think it's going to be a crack up. I know he's got a lot to fit in this city, but I dig it. I know not every MLS team has one. I think it's awesome, man. I think it's fun.
Look, I think mascots are kind of dumb. I think they're fun, but they're dumb. But I think if you're going to do it, you might as well just completely embrace what the fans want.
Right.
And Nashville went full meme with this, which is fantastic. I think at times they've maybe taken themselves a little bit too seriously in other situations, and it's good to see them just have fun with this and do something that clearly the fans had joked about and wanted for a while. And I think it's just fun.
And the video was great with him being in the bathroom.
And I love that we all know that it really started at the Metro Council meeting, even though they will never publicly admit that.
No, they never will. And they kind of came up with a good little piece of cover for that. But I think they did a really, really good job. I think it's going to be a good look on the club. And like you said, I think they have been a little too tie all the way up serious sometimes. I think this nails it, knocks it out of the park. So I'm super stoked.
The Metro Council stuff, is that before the Coyote was found in the Music City?
Before,
it was not. It was maybe, I want to say it was only a couple months.
It wasn't.
I looked this up this morning. It was August 27th, 2018, when I won't say his name, but an opponent of the stadium said that they should not build the stadium at the fairgrounds because it would just attract more children, which would turn into more food for the Coyotes.
Right. Yes. Which is such an insane thought. I got tons of coyotes out here. We got some decent acreage here in Mount Juliet, and they're cool little animals. They're fun animals, coyote. I know they're assholes or whatever, but they're cool. I dig them.
I've done I've done the DNA tests on my dogs, and one of them, Keegan,
got a little bit of coyote in him.
His he had 3 big breeds, but that were huge percentages. But the next biggest one was coyote, and so he was he was appreciative of the representation.
I dig it. Guys, I'm going to put a pin in it with that. Fun to catch up. We'll be back doing these on a semi-bi-weekly basis as news comes, but we're trying to do one every 2 weeks. We're going to also supplement those with Eurovisions. Lucas is going to be hosting those for us this year. We're stoked to be doing those. I'm Davey Shepard. We've got Ben Wright at Ben Wright on Twitter. Lucas Panzica at Lucas Panzica on Twitter. I'm at Davey T. Shep. Slape in the last week has been blocked from Twitter. I don't know what that was about. No, I'm kidding. I don't know why you can't see his name, but Slape, give him your handle.
Yeah, it's J Slape SSP.
There you go. So just check us out. We'll be talking everything that comes up. Jacob said just the other day in his presser, you should expect news on new players in the coming weeks. So that would be maybe this week or maybe
coming days and weeks. So.
Yeah. So we hope to hear something soon, potentially even this week. When the news breaks, we'll have it to you. We promise you that. And we will cite the original sources as well. I'm Davey Shepard. We will be back soon with another episode. Take it easy, guys. Have a great night. This is Speedway Soccer.